In this third podcast, I shall be continuing my explanation regarding methods. So I am going to load NetBeans, and here I have the class person and the other class with the main method, and I am going to explain in this podcast how we should write methods which return to us values. Consider these two methods which I have explained in my previous podcast, and notice that here we are writing the keyword void. This keyword void implies that these methods are returning nothing when they are being executed. In other words, when, for instance, the enter details method is invoked, Java would simply execute these lines of code, and when these lines of code are executed, that method is basically ready and it would not give us any values. I am going to write an example with a method that is going to return for us a value so that you can understand what I mean by a method which is returning something. Let me write a method that would tell us whether this particular person can drive a car or not. And I am going to write this method. And since the method is going to tell us whether the person can drive a car or not, that is a yes or a no, we can use a Boolean data type as our return value. So I am going to write the method public Boolean can drive car. As you know, a person can drive a car if he is 18 years or older. So what I am going to do is I am going to write an if statement here. If age is greater or equal to 18, then I am going to return true. Otherwise, so else, I am going to return a false. And here we have introduced a new keyword, the return keyword. And this return keyword simply returns to us this particular value when this line of code is being executed. Now, if we go in our main method here, and instead of displaying the details, I will write system.out.println p.can drive car, and I run the program. And I enter the details. If I enter the age of 25, then here I have a true, because when this method was invoked, it returned to me a true because 25 is greater than 18. If I run again this method, and I set the age to be 15, then here we have false, because as 15 is less than 18, the false is returned by the method. Please note that when the execution flow encounters a return, the value after the return is returned to the place from where this method was invoked, in our case here, and automatically the execution from this method is stopped. Let us write another method with a return data type. In this case, I am going to write a method which would give me the number of years left for this particular person to drive a car. Now, as number of years is an integer, I am going to return an integer here, get years left to drive, and obviously if the age of the person is greater or equal to 18, then the person can drive, therefore the number of years left to drive is 0. So I am going to return a 0. Otherwise, else, I am going to return 18 minus this age, so 18 minus age, and that's it. And what am I going to do now is, from the main method, I am going to write system.out.println p.get years left to drive. And when I run this program, and if I enter 15, it is going to give me a false because this person cannot drive, and a 3 because there are 3 years left for this particular person to be able to drive a car. Please note that methods can also be invoked from other methods. So I am going to go back to class person, and I am going to use these two methods in the display details method. And here I am going to write whether this person can drive a car or not. And I am going to do the following. I am going to add an if statement, and I am going to check if this particular person can drive a car first. Now, if can drive car is equal to true, then I am going to output system.out.println can drive a car. Otherwise, if the person cannot drive a car, I am going to output cannot drive a car, wait for another. And now I want to output the number of years left for this person to drive a car. So I'm going to invoke this method, which is going to return to me an integer. So get years left to drive for another years. Now, if I go back to my main method here, and I am going to remove these, and I am going to write again p.displayDetails. When I run the program and I enter the details, if I enter a person which is older than 18, then he can drive a car, while if I enter the details of a person which is under the age of 18, say for example 15 years, here we have cannot drive a car, wait for another 3 years to drive. And this brings us to the end of our third podcast. In this podcast, I have explained and gave 2 examples of methods which return a value. For other information, kindly visit our website on www.matthewschwierap.com.